Hey, hi. I think we can start. My name is Pavel Hurin, and this is the Continuous Product Discovery Masterclass. Because before we go further, could you please confirm in the Q&A section that you can hear me and you can see me? Okay, so let's start. As you know, as you probably most of you know, I'm a product manager. I'm also an author and product coach, and I currently work at Regiondo as a product manager. And I'm truly passionate about sharing knowledge, helping us other grow, and I focus on creating customer-facing tech products. And our agenda for today is, let me display the screen once again. We will start by discussing why do we need product discovery and what it is. Then I will tell you a little bit more about continuous product discovery, which is a specific type of product discovery. Then I will show you how you can apply the principles of continuous product discovery in practice. In particular, we will see how to combine opportunity solution tree proposed by Teresa Torres, opportunity score by Don Olsen, and strategizer learning and testing cards. Before we summarize, I will also show you some experiments that you can run, and some of them can be automated. And then there is part with a summary. I will share a link to the exam where you can get certified if you want. An important thing about the exam is that there are 20 questions and you will have 24 hours to answer them. So there is no rush, and you can, if you have any questions, just please ask them in the chat and I will answer them at the end. And after we finish, you can take your time and pass the exam. So in product, we should be obsessed with the why question. So let's ask ourselves, why do we need product discovery at all? Because before we define the thing, we should try to define the problem that we are trying to solve by using it. And the simple truth is that most of the ideas are not going to work. And in Inspired, Marty Kagan even said that good teams assume that at least 3/4 of our ideas won't perform as we hope. And why does it happen? I would argue that product management is at its heart about managing risk. So product manager in particular should be obsessed with 5 questions, which correspond to 5 risk areas. The first is value. So we would like to know, will it create value for our customers? Will they love this solution? Will they help them? Will they solve any real problems? The next one is usability. So can they figure out how to use that thing? Viability is about our business and different parts of the business like marketing, sales, finances, if they can support it, if we have the required channels to distribute our product. Feasibility is about the technology. So this is about whether it can be done with the current technology, if we can create an algorithm or integrate with the external system or use some library in a way that we can solve customers' problem. And the last but not least is ethic. So should we do it at all? Are there any ethical considerations? Won't it make any harm to the users or in the broader perspective to the environment, to the society? This graph you should be familiar if you are working in Scrum, and I must say that Agile did an amazing job when it comes to delivering software in small iterations, inspecting, adapting, and asking every iteration, are we building the right thing? So for example, in Scrum, we have this sprint review. In theory, this is a workshop. This is not a presentation, but we know how it works in many organizations. So here we can discuss our progress towards the product goal and decide, collaborate on what to do next. So in theory, this makes sense, but let me ask you this. What will happen if we start throwing random ideas to the product backlog and we start selecting random ideas for the implementation? Most of those ideas are not going to work. So a moment when we can test whether this idea, it was a good idea, is a sprint review. So it means that we already have production ready, tested, potentially ready to be deployed on production increment. And we just found out that the thing doesn't work. Yeah, for example, people don't want to use it. So this is waste. This is a problem. And some may say, Pavel, yeah, but the sprint is like 1 or 2 weeks, and so the risk is limited to a short period of time. And of course, you may be right, but this situation will happen every sprint. So every sprint, we select some ideas, select them for the sprint. Developers work on them. They inspect their work during the daily Scrum. We produce production ready increment, and at the end of the sprint, we find out that those were not good ideas. And if it happens every sprint, it means that like half of the work that you do is just waste. It results in waste, it results in rework, and there must be a better way. Another issue is that the best ideas might not even be on the list. So there are some ideas that seems to work, but how do we know that if there is something better that can be done that will produce even more value? So we would really like to know how we can first came up with better ideas, and how can we validate our ideas before implementation, before we select those ideas, if we work in Scrum for the sprint, if we work in Kanban, before we are taking them from to do to some state like in progress. And ideally, we end up with a validated product backlog. So the list of ideas for which the most important risks related to those 5 areas, value, usability, viability, visibility, and ethic, are addressed. And the answer is, as you may expect, continuous product discovery. And Jeff Patton, so I need to put it into the perspective. Jeff Patton and others in the agile product space, also Marty Kagan, have been proponents of the approach called dual track development or dual track agile. So the goal of product discovery, in particular in this case, this is a continuous product discovery, is to discover the product to build and validate our ideas. And the goal of product delivery is to deliver that product to the market and get feedback. What's important is that continuous product discovery, this is not something that we do upfront. So it's not about discovering the solution, describing our product in detail, and then starting like 3 or 4 months of implementation phase. This is done continuously. So let's say every week or every 2 weeks, the team discovers, ideates ideas, interviews customers, it identifies hypotheses and tests those hypotheses with the help of prototypes and experiments. And the same team works on continuously delivering value and getting feedback, ideally from customers using it. And there is this common misconception that some say that product manager is the single person that decides what should be built. And software engineers and designers, they should just focus on how to build it. Have you heard it before? It's really hurt my ears. Because product discovery, so discovering what can be built and addressing those risks that we mentioned before is not a task for a single person. I deeply believe that instead of building silos with stage gates. It's much better to embrace a collaborative approach. And the concept of product trio was introduced by Teresa Torres in continuous discovery habits. And as a product manager, we should make sure that product designer and at least one engineer, this is typically lead engineer, are included. It's not only about discovering better ideas, but also building a shared understanding of what is needed. This also allows you to stay open on different perspectives because product designer and lead engineer look from a different angle on what you are building. And in particular, product manager is not an expert in the technology, and you need technology to solve people's problems. So if we agree that customer is not an expert and customers don't know what is possible with the current technology, why so many people think that product manager should know it? Product manager may have some idea, maybe technology literate, but the best ideas, and this is what I have repeatedly found, often came from engineers because engineers are the experts on what's possible with the current technology. So we have this group of people, and they start working on product discovery. And what you can see here is the double diamond, known from design thinking. It can be used to represent product discovery activities. So there are two parts, as you can see. On the left, there is a problem space. So it's about performing interviews. You can also utilize product analytics, interview internal stakeholders, perform some surveys to collect data, basically collect information and understand customers. And then there is this second phase, define, when we want to structure our knowledge about problems. And favorite technique is using opportunity solution tree proposed by Teresa Torres. And I will present it in a moment. So when we leave this problem space, we have a specific structured problem. And then we start working on discovering how we can solve this problem. And this is typically done by ideating. And Teresa Torres recommends that we should ideate, brainstorm separately and only meet to combine our ideas. And once we have a bunch of ideas, we can start formulating, identifying assumptions that can be tested. And assumptions are things that needs to be true for this idea to work. I will present it in a moment, so it will be more clear. And the end result of product discovery is a specific validated solution idea, so that, once again, risk related to value, usability, viability, feasibility, and ethics are addressed. Okay, and how we can do it in practice? Because even though product discovery, I would argue that this is the most important area for product manager, especially for an existing product. Continuous product discovery is what you should spend most of your time on. Many people struggle after reading books how to implement the theory in practice. So the basic tool that you can use is already mentioned opportunity solution tree. This is proposed by Teresa Torres in continuous discovery habits. And what you can see on the top is some product outcome. Product outcome is the goal. It can be expressed, for example, as objective key result. But what's important, this is the goal that the team can directly influence. So it's not about growing sales. It's not about reducing costs. It's not about those high-level business objectives. This is something that if you work in a core product team, this is what your core product team can directly influence by your product efforts. So, for example, if you want to increase sales, and this is a sales growth model, the goal for your core product team may be to increase engagement. That's just an example. And then we start interviewing customers. So this is this emphasizing phase. And Teresa Torres recommends that we should interview our customers at least every week. And this is done by the whole trio. Marty Kagan is even more rigorous about this because he says that if the whole trio is not present, we should cancel the interview. Regardless of your approach, the goal is to first understand customers and then map problems that they have, but not any problem that they can mention, but the problems that when solved will drive the expected outcome. So we are focusing on increasing engagement by 20%, and the way to do it is to solve specific customer problems. And one of the problems for a web video platform may be that the person cannot find anything to watch. And if we ask additional questions, it may turn out that they cannot figure out how to search for a specific show. So there is this structure of opportunities. We call them opportunities, but those may be problems, needs, desires, pains that people have. And then we ideate on how to best solve those problems. So for example, one of the idea for a person that cannot figure out how to search for a specific show, maybe displaying a simple search box. Another one might be a recommendations engine. Once we have those ideas, we would like to identify what needs to be true for this idea to work. So this is about identifying risks related to value, usability, viability, feasibility, and you can also think about ethics. The one way to do it, and I will also present it in a moment, is to use user story map. But once we identify those assumptions, we can design and run experiments. And you can do it in Miro, you can do it in PowerPoint, you can do it even on paper. But I would like to show you the template that I am using, and this template is available as part of product management resources. As all of you are premium subscribers, you can go to the PM resources and duplicate my Notion collection, so you will have access to editable version. And the approach that I will present combines three techniques. So one is opportunity solution tree, of course. Another one is opportunity score formula by Dan Olsen, and we will use them to prioritize problems, prioritize opportunities. And the last element is strategizer testing and learning cards to collect information, plan our experiments, and select which experiments should be performed and which can be perhaps ignored. So there are 4 steps that correspond to 4 areas of product discovery of this design thinking. The first step is to run customer interviews, because those are mostly interviews. And let me show you the demo. But before I present a demo, I would like to make sure that you can hear me. So I will just look at the chat and make sure that there are no strange messages that, for example, you can see anything. Okay, I see you're still here, so let's continue. Okay, so let's go to the example. So customer interviews can be organized like this. So this is to explore the problem space. At this phase, we don't think about how we can solve those problems. We would like just to note them. And what I typically do is for every customer, note some memorable quote. If we have a photo of the person, it helps really think about that conversation after it is finished. So a memorable quote, maybe you lived only once. And also I try to collect some quick facts, some insights collected during this interview. If you interview your customers using some online tool, some communication tool like Teams or uh, Zoom, you can also attach the recording. And here are the opportunities that I identified when interviewing this person. So the person was unable to find anything to watch. His favorite series was over, and he didn't know about new episodes of his favorite series. And this list of interviews, it's a quite handy way to organize knowledge about interviews, but my tips will be that it's important to remember that people are biased. So instead of letting them generalize, it's much better to ask about specific situations, like tell me about the last time you had that problem, or what happened next? Did someone help you solve this problem? And we should prioritize facts and behaviors, because people are less likely to be biased when asked about describing a specific situation. Also, I don't like to take those interviews too far. So typically 7, 15, maybe 20 interviews. This might be enough to get meaningful results. I also like to interview not only customers, but also people from the organization. And this is the common mistake many many product managers make. So when the new product manager starts work in the organization, then they often start interviewing customers, like there was no knowledge in the organization and they want to discover everything from scratch. But people from like sales, success, customer support, even funders, they already spend and they regularly spend dozens or maybe hundreds hours with customers every month. So even though they might be biased, ignoring knowledge that is currently in the organization, this is wasteful. So I really encourage you to interview not only customers, but also people from your company who may have important insights. And those insights often cannot be easily identified with 10, 15, 20 interviews. Another tip that I can give is that it doesn't have to be interview, it can be a survey that you send to the users. Also, it's quite helpful when you can combine product analytics with customer interviews, because customer interviews can tell you why something happens, and product analytics can explain you what customers are doing. So product analytics alone can allow you to observe the situation, but to understand the root cause, you need to interview your customers. And also, one of the ways to explore, to discover those bottom layer opportunities is to keep asking why. So instead of being satisfied with the first answer, you keep asking why, why, why. Of course, you can do it in a more subtle way. But the point is that sometimes people explain, when asked about the reason, they explain with something that is not obvious and is not the root cause of the problem. It also helps to understand customers, but this is also helpful when building a relationship with the customer, to ask them about their feelings, fears, ambitions, and desires. So, for example, why is it a problem for you? How does it influence your job? How does it impact your personal goals, life plans? How do you feel about that? What will be the long-term consequences for you if it doesn't change? What would change in your life if we solved this problem? Why do you want to solve it now? Why do you want to solve this problem not other problems. And this can also this can often lead to unexpected answers. So I really encourage you to ask those type of questions. Once we collect the information, like interviews, surveys, interviewing internal customers, internal employees, we can start defining the problem. And once again, let's go back to the Notion template. So I usually do it like this. So for every opportunity, I try to define two additional parameters. One is how important it is for the customer and how satisfied customers are with what they already have. And this is important because once we collect maybe 10, maybe 20 different problems, opportunities, we would like to choose which one should be addressed first, and maybe some of them shouldn't be addressed at all. And for this, I'm using Dan Olsen opportunity score formula. Let me present it. So this is a much simple way, much simpler than the original formula of jobs to be done theory that has a nice visual representation. So what it tells is that the more important the problem is for the customer, that this is obvious, the more value solving this problem can create. And also the less satisfied customers are with what they already have. This is this S1, the more value we can create because we can potentially increase this satisfaction to 100%. And the opportunity to create value can be represented as this yellow area. So this is a equation, but I hope this is not a too complex one. So importance multiplied by 1 minus satisfaction. And how can we ask customers? So this should be done during the interviews, but we structure those opportunities after the interviews. So you can write it as a text. You don't have to calculate it. You don't have to combine opportunities related to different customers. Just put them in the notes. But then after interview is finished, you go to the solution to the opportunity repository, and you would like to note that points. So for example, this is simplified because this is on a scale from 1 to 5, and this should be from 1 to 10. But nevertheless, when we want to ask about satisfaction, we can ask when using some solution. It might be our solution, it might be other solution. How satisfied are you with your ability to achieve outcome? So outcome, this is there are many types of outcome, but outcome in this context means that this is some functional outcome for the customer. This can be emotional outcome or social outcome. But the basic one is the functional, and it will typically have social and emotional dimensions. And when we want to ask about the importance, one of the templates I use is when performing some step in your job, dear customer, how important is it for you that you are able to something? So for example, share photos or browse movies or find your favorite series. This is also for a scale, on a scale from 1 to 5, it can be on 1 to 10. In that case, you need to calculate the points accordingly. And what I did here is I normalized these points to 10. So instead of Dan Olsen does it from 0 to 1. So the importance is from 0 to 1, and the satisfaction is from 0 to 1, and the opportunity to add value, which is a multiplication, is from 0 to 1. I normalized everything to whole numbers, so it's easier to represent, but the idea is the same. So For example, for this, my favorite series is over, and average importance for the customers in some customer segment might be 9. And so this is an extremely important opportunity, extremely important problem for the customers. And at the same time, they are extremely not satisfied with the current solution. So if we multiply it, so multiply 9 multiplied by 10 minus 2, which equals 8. So we have 72, but I normalized everything to 10, so it's 7.2. And it means that it is an important problem. Customers are not satisfied, so there is a huge opportunity to add value by solving this problem. Okay. So it looks like this. And as I said, in practice, you want to map those opportunities, note those opportunities during interviews, but you don't draw an opportunity solution tree when talking to a person. When talking to a person, you would like to focus on that user, on understanding this user, and only after interview is over, you can, of course, you need to ask about importance and satisfaction, but only after the interview is over, and ideally after several interviews, you can sit and aggregate this knowledge and create this opportunity tree. And also the important thing is that we shouldn't overthink the problem space. And while it is important to understand the jobs that customers want to perform and jobs to be done, theory might definitely be helpful. You should spend most of your time discovering a solution. So it doesn't make sense to interview customers like 2, 3, 4 months, because this is just costly. This is wasteful. In most scenarios, problems are not that complex, and interviewing hundreds of customers also doesn't make much sense. And this is supported by Mart Kagan in one of his interviews recently, that the product trio should spend, and in particular, product managers should spend most of the time discovering solutions, not discovering problems that should be solved. Once we define opportunities, once we calculate those points and we know which opportunities can be prioritized, like this one, okay, like this one here. So this is the opportunity that can be prioritized. The next step is to brainstorm, ideate, and think how we can solve those problems. So for this, I have another view. Solution ideas. So you can also do it from this upper layer. So for example, if I select my favorite series is over, I can add a new idea here. But I'm in read-only mode. But if you use the site that you can duplicate, and if you duplicate it, you can add idea directly here. But we can also do it from this view, and here ideas are grouped by the opportunity. So for example, for this my favorite series is over, one idea might be that we want to display similar series, and another idea to solve this problem may be to watch random series. Okay, we have some ideas. Typically, we need more than 2. And when brainstorming, you can end up with like 20 different ideas of solving a particular target opportunity. But maybe before I describe those properties, I would like to mention one more thing, because another source of ideas may be benchmarking. So seeing what competitors do and how they solve those problems. And in some situations, it might be a good idea, but at the same time, we should remember that if you try to compete with everyone and solve the same problems in the same way like everyone else do, you can't be the best at anything. So you are just an average. So the point of having a strategy is not being the best everywhere. It's about being the best at playing field of your choice. So focusing some group of problems, focusing on some market segment, but market areas are defined by problems. So basically you want to select some part of the market and focus on solving those problems better than anyone else rather than copying all solutions from all different areas. And strategy requires trade-offs, so it means that some problems will not be solved and some should be solved much better, way better than everyone else. With that said, the quality of opportunity, so the potential of opportunity is not the only one ingredient that we should take into account, because implementing ideas is not free and different ideas might have different cost of the implementation. And of course, at this stage, we do not know the exact cost, but we can try to estimate it. So for example, I know that shooting a rocket on the moon will be way more costly than running a train between two cities. So we would like to make a relative estimation between the ideas that we have on the list to account for this economic perspective. And how we can select the idea for implementation is dividing how much value can be created by solving this opportunity. So in this case, this is my favorite series is over. The potential value that we can create is 7.2, but also how costly, how much effort we need to put into solving this problem. And in this case, display similar series, this is 3, and watch a random series, this is 2. And we can calculate this is not a ROI, but this is a proportional return on investment. So if we divide the value of the solution by the cost of the solution, we have this opportunity to cost ratio, which allows us to prioritize ideas. So first we want to prioritize problems, but having a problem, for example, my favorite series is over. We want to, in that case, we want to select a solution that is more cost effective, because we also need to account for the economic reality. Okay, and once we have our ideas, we know how much value we can create by solving problems. We know what is the cost of implementing, estimated cost of implementing every idea. We would like to ask ourselves what has to be true for this idea to work. So, for example, what has to be true for display similar series idea to work? And a great way to identify hypotheses, identify those things that needs to be true, is by using user story map. And this story map is available in templates, so you can access it. You can download the whole repository and adjust it to your needs. So what is it is about? This is a simplified view. So in practice, you might have more steps, but this is the journey the story that user has to take in order to get the value from some solution. So in this case, to display recommended movies, the recommended series or movies, the first step is that user goes to the movies catalog. Then system has to display recommendations. And the next step is that user can select the recommended movie. And for every step, we can map more actors than user and the system. Perhaps there will be more, especially in B2B software. You may have more actors taking part in getting value from something. For each of those steps, we would like to consider what needs to be true when it comes to desirability, usability, visibility. And viability is about the business perspective. So this is typically done not by user story mapping. I just talk to my stakeholders. And product manager is a person that should understand how different parts of the business operate, what their work is about, should have context to those people and ensure that solution will work for them. And the same with ethic. It would be too abstract for me to ask ethical questions for every step of user story map. So instead, as a team, when you create something, you should, in reality, in many situations, you would just feel if this is right or not. And if you don't, you can just take one idea after another and consider if this is ethical and if this is also in line with the law or some internal compliance of your organization. But when it comes to user story map, for this first step, the first step is go to movies catalog. So desirability or value for the customers. Some obvious candidates are that user wants to browse movie catalog, because if user doesn't want, they will not go to this catalog. And another assumption may be that user wants to look for other movies on our platform because they may choose, for example, YouTube. How do we know that when the favorite series is over, user wants to use our platform? Maybe they are just mad that they cannot find anything. They instantly start browsing other solutions. In that case, maybe we can find another idea to keep them on our platform. And usability, by default, this is a very simple rule that every time user does something, the default question is that whether user know how to do it, but you can also be more creative in some cases. So in this case, user knows how to display movies catalog or knows how to find this option in the system. For display recommendations, the only assumption that has to be true is that our technology allows creating a reliable algorithm. So we can display high quality recommendations, but also that we can display it timely so that user does not have to wait like 5 minutes before seeing some results, because they will most likely log off and look for another solution. And for the last step, select recommended movie. Desirability, so a value for the customers is that user wants to use recommendations. Maybe they don't find it valuable, and also that they know how to use recommendations. For example, you can display the list of recommendations, but it is not clear that those are recommendations and that you can actually click them to start watching another series. Okay, once we generate hypotheses, so maybe once again, we have the opportunity tree. For every opportunity, we have identified possible ideas of solving those problems, needs, and desires. For every idea, we have identified hypotheses. And now we would like to start testing those hypotheses. The important thing is that we do not want to test every possible hypotheses. But let me change the slide a little bit. So we do not want to test every possible hypothesis because you may have like 20 opportunities or 30 opportunities in your opportunity solution tree. For every opportunity, target opportunity, you may generate like 20 different ideas. And for every idea, you may generate like a dozen of assumptions. So testing everything, it would be too costly, too wasteful. So what we really want to focus on is testing high risk assumptions. We want to prioritize hypotheses that are easy to test. So the cost of performing an experiment will be acceptable for our team. And also those are experiments that we can run pretty quickly, because even if the cost is low, if we need to wait like 4 weeks before running an experiment, the time to market will scrap the bottom. So in that case, we may decide just to implement an idea and see how it works on production. Okay, and let me show you the repository. And yeah, before I open properties of the hypothesis, I would like to present you two cards proposed by Strategizer. This is a testing card. So we have a hypothesis. We believe that, for example, user can figure out how to watch for a specific series. Then we have a test that needs to be performed. So to verify our hypothesis, we will, for example, create a prototype and run an experiment using Maze. Maze is a platform for running UX experiments. And how would we know what we can measure during this experiment? So, for example, we can measure misclick rate. We can see what was the average session time. We can measure customers' behavior. And we can ask them also to quantify the experience with the prototype. And the last step is, how do we know that the hypothesis was correct? So, for example, 70% of people clicked the right button, and it was the first click that they performed when they saw the prototype. So this might be a success criteria. So it means that people can figure out how to use this solution. And after running an experiment, this is the same hypothesis. So we believed that what we have measured. So for example, we have measured that 65% of people figured out how to click the right button and did it with the first click. What we have learned. So for example, we have learned that the font size was too small or something, because additionally we asked some questions and people just provided an answer. And what we will do next, so we can increase the font size, and in that case, we think that the risk is not big, so we will just continue with the implementation. And as you can see, in Strategizer, there are additional properties like action required, how reliable the data is, what is the cost of the test, and how much time is required to run an experiment. And I have combined those properties in the hypothesis repository. So if we open, for example, this one, user will want to use recommendations. So as you can see, there is a hypothesis. So we believe that users will want to use recommendations. The risk related to this hypothesis is high. So it means that if this hypothesis is not correct, there is a high risk for the idea. This is a value risk. And other categories are usability, feasibility, viability, and ethics. And how costly is the test? How much time it will take? what is or what is the evidence, how strong is the evidence that we got. And below we have this form when we can, like in strategizer cards, we can just summarize what we know. So what we will do to verify our hypothesis. So for example, we create a Figma prototype and link it to the maze experiment, which is a first click test. We'll measure the misclick ratio, and if we are right, then we expect the following outcome. And here you can note what we observed, what we have learned, and what we will do next. And just to summarize those hypotheses, the worst solution is to ask customers what they think about your idea, because people are biased and they often do not understand motives of their behaviors. So people are experts in their pains, but they do not really understand how to solve them. And they also are not fully aware of their motives, so why they did something. So this expertise is sometimes hidden, and you need to ask. But this is about interviewing. You need to ask about behavioral data and ask behavioral questions. We don't want to, just to summarize, we don't want to test every hypothesis. We want to test hypotheses that have a high risk, that when the cost of running an experiment is low, this is a good indicator that it is worth to test, to run this experiment. When there is a short time required to run an experiment, and this high risk of the hypothesis, this is also related to expensive idea. So if the idea is not expensive, then the risk is not high, because even if this idea does not work, we won't waste a much of work. So in particular, we would like to prioritize testing expensive ideas. And another tip is that you can automate running those experiments, and this is something I can really recommend by using tools like Maze. I'm not an affiliate, I'm just a user. So Maze allows you not only to test ideas like testing prototypes online, testing tree testing, or 5-second test, or this first click test that I mentioned. But the problem for teams that try to experiment is often finding participants for tests. And with Maze, it is quite easy to recruit participants just in your application. So you can just display a link, you can just display a pop-up and ask people that are more enthusiastic about your solution to sign up, and they will receive questions so that they can take part in the experiment to make your product better for you and for them. And let's quickly discuss different types of experiments. So the classification that I will present, this is classification proposed by Marty Kagan. I will add some additional comments. So there are four basic types of experiments. The first one are low fidelity user prototypes. Low fidelity, it means that you can test UX, you can test behavior, but it doesn't really look like a product. And the tool that I was using in the past is, for example, Balsamiq, but you can also create those prototypes in Miro or in Figma. Another type of experiment are high fidelity user prototypes, and they actually look like a real application. And with the development of modern design tools, I think I observed that it is less and less common to use those sketches, to use those low fidelity user prototypes, because prototypes either way should be done by designer, not product manager, and designers typically have some libraries of ready-to-use components from which they can quickly create prototype that looks like a real application. They don't want to draw every line from scratch. So in my teams, for example, in Regiondo, like we work right now, we start right with high fidelity user prototypes, and this kind of prototypes can be done in 1-2 days for several screens, maybe a week if designer has another tasks. But basically, a single screen can be done in hours, including some iterations, including some discussions on Slack. And the last two types of prototypes are feasibility prototypes. Feasibility prototype is testing risk related to technology. So this may be, for example, spike that you can know from agile approaches. When we want to test if the technology is reliable, if we can create a specific algorithm, if we can integrate with the external system. And it's not really about using something that you can directly implement and directly deploy on production. This is just developer doing some work to make sure technology allows you to implement some of your idea. This requires coding, of course, so this might be more expensive than creating a simple prototype. And the last type of prototypes are live data prototypes. They are typically used in A/B testing, and what's important about them is that we want to send live traffic to them, to this prototype. So this is not a sketch, this is not a Figma prototype, this is part of the application, but it doesn't have to be fully production ready. So, for example, it can cover only selected use cases, some few use cases, not all of them. And you do not have to think about search engine optimization. If your product supports many languages, you can create this kind of prototype only in one language. You also don't need to think about performance and scalability because this doesn't have to scale. It can be like, for example, 1,000 users that will use it during a few days. So it's just a small portion of live traffic, but what's important is that people will use this prototype for real, and then you can compare the results with what you already have and see which one performs better. And A/B testing, this is about testing it on production, which you and users are unaware of it, but you can do it also in opt-in or invite-only modes when it is clear that people are invited to test a new version of the application, like a new admin panel. Okay, so we have discussed, so far we have discussed what is continuous product discovery and how we can perform continuous product discovery, combining opportunity solution tree, opportunity score, and how we can identify hypotheses. We have also discussed 4 types of experiments that we can run, and now I would like to go to the one more part, which is presenting you some ideas of how you can get maximum value from your user prototypes, because user prototypes are the most common type of prototype. The best in some sense that you can use. In some organizations, user prototypes serve as containers of resources for developers. So those are images, CSS styles, and that kind of stuff. But experienced PM understand that prototypes are the most important tool to validate desirability and usability of ideas, and that this should be done before the implementation. And those are also the cheapest experiments you can make. And my favorite ones are, the first one is about giving a user a task to accomplish. So for example, you can ask a user to make a reservation and give them a clickable prototype. You can observe how they interact with the prototype, if they can achieve the goal, how many misclicks you can see, and if there are any usability issues, like users spending 1.5 minutes on a single screen trying to figure out what to do next. And most of those tests can be automated, so you do not necessarily have to invite user for a conversation and sit and do it together. You can just send a link to the solution like Maze or Optimal Workshop, and then this session with every click, every mouse movement, and how user interacts with your prototypes and different screens, it will be recorded. Another type is first click testing. I really like it. It's helpful. It's helpful for sure for testing if people can understand what is required from them. So this is, you would like to make sure that if they are given a task like make a reservation, if they will actually click a make a reservation button, or maybe they will click a photo. So if they click a photo, maybe a better solution is to display a reservation pop-up after the person clicks a pop-up and remove the button again completely. This is just an example. I'm pretty sure it's not the best one, but I hope you understand. So we don't want to teach users, but we want to understand what they should do, but we want to understand how they understand the interface, and we can change the interface, or we can just follow the understanding. Another one is ask what would happen. So we ask user to imagine a scenario when they use a prototype, and we just ask them what would happen after you would click that button, of what would happen if you click this tab in the top navigation. And this can help you understand how users perceive your product, and this can also help you gain insights, gain some valuable insights in how they perceive your idea. The next one is card sorting. Card sorting, I think I use it only for structuring navigation. So recently in my product, we had this navigation, maybe not facelifting, but redesign of the navigation. And instead of talking it internally, discussing it internally and figuring out what would be the best for our customers, we just collected all possible options and asked some users to categorize them, to group them in some containers. And this is a great way to understand how users perceive and categorize information. And then you can, of course, analyze what they did and say that, okay, they put it here, but we know that people don't use it so often, so we will move it to another place. But understanding how people perceived and how they categorize information, this is a great way of experiment to do it. The 5-second test is it is great for testing landing pages. So we present a prototype for just a few seconds and then ask people what they can remind about the prototype. And this can help you see if the messaging is clear and if they understand your value proposition, for example, and if they understand what they are supposed to do. Storyboarding, it's about presenting a series of sketches. This is typically workshop together with the customer. And this can help us understand if they understand the concept, if they find the concept encouraging. I find it useful at the initial stage of exploring the solution space. So if you already have well-developed ideas, you would probably want to select another type of high fidelity prototypes. Reverse testing, another one. This is a great way to, so it's about presenting users a prototype and ask them about using it in an unintended or unexperienced way. And this is helpful to identify potential flaws, but also some new opportunities that you can consider before, you have not considered before, because it's not said that people will do something stupid, maybe they will find a creative way to use your tool, use your product or some model of your product to create even more value. So this is a really nice type of experiment. Role playing, this is something I typically do with my teams, not with the customers. So we take different roles that involve our prototype, like first-time user, expert user, person with accessibility needs. And this is helpful to see how our idea fits into different situations. We can explore edge cases like how people that is frustrated or how an expert can react to what we have created. And also it helps build empathy within a team, because after this kind of workshops, people remember. This is also often funny. We are laughing. So after this workshop, people can easily remind what has happened, and when they create software, when they are solving problems, they will have those images in their heads. And the last three types of experiments you can run is A/B testing. A/B testing is typically done for a live application, but you can do it also with prototypes. So instead of testing a single prototype, you create two or more versions and see which one is more usable or desirable for the customers. Heat mapping it's not really an experiment, it's more a data visualization technique which records clicks or mouse moves. And this can help you identify areas of your prototype that users are drawn to, or maybe they struggle with those areas. And this is possible in tools like Maze, Hotjar, and also Optimal Workshop. And the last one is cognitive walkthrough. So this is also done during traditional interviews, when we start by defining a series of tasks or goals, and we ask the first-time user to discuss what is their thought process. So they perform the task, they are trying to achieve a goal that we defined, but they explain out loud what they are doing, how they are thinking. And this is also extremely helpful to identify some gaps in the user experience and get some insights that you might not have discovered otherwise. And the last part, let me check if you are still here. There are no problems. I will look on the chat. I will answer the questions after after the last part. So in a moment. So just to sum up, most of our ideas are not going to work. And implementing them and testing, even if we work in short iterations, results in waste and rework. And that's why we need product discovery to run experiment, to validate our hypotheses related to our ideas, so that we end up, the result is validated product backlog. I presented you the design thinking, so this double diamond with problems, exploring the problem space on the left and exploring the solution space on the right. We also spoke about product trio, which is product manager, product designer, and typically lead engineer, at least one engineer, and that they should perform product discovery together. While product designer is responsible for usability, primarily for usability, and engineers are responsible for feasibility, the main scope of responsibility for product manager is the value for the customers and the value for the business. So desirability and viability. We also spoke about the opportunity solution tree, that we should prioritize opportunities, not ideas. So first we need to understand what is the potential for the idea to create value. And this can be calculated by multiplying how important the idea is and how much satisfaction can we create. So one minus current satisfaction with solutions that customer use. We also mentioned that we don't want to test every hypothesis, and we would like to prioritize hypotheses where the cost of the test and time of the test is short, and where the risk related to hypothesis is high. We also need to include the economic perspective. So even though some problems may be important and the opportunity to add value is high, the cost of implementing an idea may be too high. So we need to take into account not only the opportunity solution score, but also this estimated cost of implementing a specific idea. Customers don't know what they need, but they are expert in their pains. But this expertise, sometimes it is hidden. So we need to ask additional questions, ask about specific situations to get this knowledge from them and get to the root cause of the problems. And the last point is that the worst type of experiment that you can perform is to ask customers what they think about your idea. There are much better ways that are connected to behavioral data, to what customers actually do, some specific situations from their past. My Notion template, I already told you that the Notion template is available in the resources, and there are also additional links and materials. So this is a read-only version, but in the full version, you will have some additional tips like there are those links to interviews, opportunities, solution ideas, hypotheses. Many elements of the presentation are described in the Notion template, and also there are links to additional materials like Teresa Torres' video or the Norson opportunity score formula, which I have not presented. I have presented only my introduction, which is a PDF with this formula, and also strategizer cards and explanation how you can use them. Okay, so you should be able to find it in PM resources on the top of the Product Compass newsletter. I hope that now you should be able to understand what continuous product discovery is and why do we need it. You should be able to prioritize opportunities and select the best problems to solve. You should know the best practices and avoid common mistakes, like asking customers about what they think about the idea, and the best practice. The best practices like opportunity solution tree, like using the opportunity score to prioritize opportunities, using strategizer cards to organize knowledge about your experiments and also learnings. And you should be able to identify assumptions by using user story map, and also one of the templates is available in my templates, but this is pretty simple. It's just a graphical representation of different steps that user has to take in order to get value from the solution. And for each of the steps, we would like to identify risks related to value, usability, feasibility. So now the exam. The link is valid for 24 hours. The test consists of 20 single choice questions. This is a Google form test. At least 16 points are required to pass, which I think if you have listened, you should be able to answer that and do it quite comfortably. You can approach the test twice. There is not a hard limit, but I will verify it manually. I will just order answers by emails and analyze only the first two. It is okay to use notes, and I will send you certificates. Next week is the latest possible time, but some of you may receive certificates even today. Okay, so I will share the link in the chat, and I will start answering your questions from Q&A. Okay, so first, there's the chat. And also I will publish this link in the Q&A. One more thing, if you liked this masterclass, it would be great if you can leave me a testimonial. I will also copy this link in a moment, but now let's start with the Q&A. I will switch the view so you can see me again. And I need one moment to organize. I will start answering your questions. What if the user base is small and they are not engaged with your product and rejecting the interviews? Is there any specific way to engage with your customer? For example, I have created a questionnaire and I've got less than 10 replies. Yeah, the common way to approach it is to pay customers for taking part in experiments. And this doesn't necessarily have to be your customers. Those may be people that just have similar characteristics. So you don't have to choose your existing customers. You can select people from the market that have this type of needs and have not yet became your customers. But this is often a problem, and especially in B2B, it is sometimes more challenging to run experiments on a large groups of people, because if you have a solution for a financial department, it may be challenging to recruit 20, 30 financial directors. But you can find similar people from finance, maybe. Can you please help me out in this? Thanks. I don't understand the question. Can you please help me out in this? Maybe you can be more specific. For now, I will dismiss this question. I don't understand it. Pavel, I am having a quick question. I guess the answer of this question could be biased. I'm having a quick question. I guess the answer of this question could be biased. Quick question. Once again, Pavel, I'm having a quick question. I guess the answer of this question could be biased. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. I will dismiss it and please answer it. Please ask it again if you can. Okay. Would you consider technical cost of implementation as part of the feasibility of viability assumption? For me, this is a viability. So technical cost of the implementation, for me, this is cost of developers, right? So how many hours or how many sprints you need to deliver a specific idea. So the question is not whether people are willing to pay, to invest their time in the implementation. The question is whether it will create enough value for the business to justify the investment, and if there are no better alternative investments you can make. Because by doing a particular investment, you can lose opportunity. So then there is a lost opportunity cost. So for me, this is a business related to working for different parts of the business, in particular finances. Could you please explain these methods would work in B2B product? Yeah, they work exactly the same. If you have a B2B product, the product will have users and it will have buyers, and users and buyers might be different people. But other than that, when it comes to value for the users and see whether user can figure out how to use your product, you can do it exactly the same. The only question is how to recruit those people, which can be sometimes tricky, but in most cases it can be done. Yeah, so you need to understand the problems. You need to interview people, but but you need to interview more of them because you need to interview and address problems of both buyers and users of your product. And the same with solving problems. You need to solve problems, some problems for the buyers, and probably you need to solve problems for the users, because otherwise they will complain and they will not like your solution. And in that case, buyer may also start supporting it. Is value risk desirability assumption? Yes, it is. Value risk and desirability, it is the same. I will make a note to make it more coherent between screens. Desirability, value, it is the same. What are strategies when the risk is high, but the cost to test is also high? So I'm not sure it's a strategy, but it's just a approach you can take. So one approach is to make a test and pay for the test, and another one is don't make a test and risk by implementing a solution. So you really need to compare those two costs and decide which makes more sense. If the test, for example, if the test will cost $10,000 and the implementation will cost $100, and the probability that the solution will not work is 50%, I will make a test. But if the test is like 50,000 and implementing a solution is 100,000, I would try to find a different test I can perform. I'm not sure I will invest $100,000 just to validate idea. Because perhaps this idea has too high risk and you shouldn't do it at all. And if you believe that it will create much more value that it costs, then you may just go with the implementation. Your presentation is excellent. Will it be available for replay? Can I purchase access to it to my teammates? Yeah, I will. Thank you. I will, by June 1st, I will create a video course based on this masterclass. And yeah, you can purchase it. It will be available for every premium subscriber of the product Compass. So all you need to do is to buy a gift subscription. And the link for a gift subscription is, for example, under the last post about MVPs. And yeah, in June they will receive an access to self-led video course, and perhaps I'm not sure if I will repeat this masterclass, but something tells me that I will. So when we solve for the opportunity, is the solution that we test or the hypothesis? We always want to test the hypothesis, not the solution. Of course, prototypes often represent the solution, but what we really want to know is what needs to be true for this solution to work. And yeah, so of course, it's difficult to do not talking about the solution in some cases, but we really need to focus on validating those assumptions, not validating the solution. Okay, road mapping. When would you introduce an idea opportunity into the roadmap? I typically don't introduce ideas on the roadmap. In one of the articles that is on Substack, I discussed the now next later product roadmap, and on this roadmap, I try to present some objectives and problems that I'm going to solve. So for example, we will solve problem that customer cannot find for a specific series. If we are talking about the nearest future, but even if we are talking about the nearest future, even if you run experiments and you minimize the risk, you it's not guaranteed that the idea will work after you release it on production. So it's much better to focus on communicating which problems will be solved. And once you release it, and for example, you can enable this for a small number of people, then you can communicate that it will be available for everyone. I don't include features in my roadmaps. Discovery roadmap, road mapping. Do you keep a discovery roadmap that you present internally or externally? Discovery roadmap that you present internally or externally? I'm not sure what it means. Do you keep a discovery roadmap that you present internally or externally? Yeah, roadmap. So let me say it differently. Roadmap is a tool to communicate the strategy and the strategic direction. It's not to inform about the features. And whether or not you want to communicate your strategy to the customers and competitors, it depends. So typically, you do not inform everyone about everything, and you may want to reveal more information to internal stakeholders. Bartek Hagan says the best teams iterate over 10 per week. How is that even possible in practice? I don't know this particular. Maybe they run 10 or 20 experiments per week. This is possible that Bartek Hagan said this, but I iterate times 10 times per week. If Marta Kagan said this, I don't agree. Even in Scrum, you can iterate once a day, and then you developers every day during the daily Scrum, they can review their progress, inspect their progress, and review their progress towards the sprint goal. But this is daily, not every 4 hours. So I don't know this quote. I would assume that it is about running experiments 10 times a week, over 10 times a week, and this is actually possible. Follow-up question. Could you also share some examples? Share examples. I will note this question, but I'm not sure. Maybe I can provide some examples, not right now. This was so helpful, very well organized, and had no filler. One of the best investments from my career. Thank you for putting this together so clearly and actionable. Thank you. How can we get the link to the exam for batch? I think I shared this. Okay. Is there a different approach between B2B and B2C? I think I answered those questions. Pavel, what is your advice for aligning your fellow product managers and your team who is more biased toward whatever product development around continuous product discovery? So continuous product discovery is just a tool that we use to solve some problem. So I would try to understand if everything works right in your organization right now, if customers are satisfied, if stakeholders are satisfied in the current ways of working, if the product is successful. But if this is the case, maybe you don't need continuous product discovery. But if it is not, maybe it's maybe you should run an experiment. Maybe you could run an experiment with the whole team, or maybe only in some specific area, or maybe for a specific product, and see if the outcomes will be different, because what we are doing right now is not working correctly. So for sure, I wouldn't do it by educating them, and yeah, they need to understand that something needs to change, that they have a problem, and then you can offer a solution. So when we solve for the opportunity with a prototype, is it the solution that we want to test? I answered it. We want to test a hypothesis. What is the most challenging about product discovery? Another one. Yeah, I haven't thought about it, but it's quite challenging for me personally to always perform continuous product discovery in the product trio. And sometimes there are different priorities and different things in the organization, and we need to make some trade-offs. But whenever possible, we try to do it together. So this is something that is closer to my heart right now. But in general, I would have to think about another answer. It's not hard. I like product discovery, so those are just challenges that are natural. Can we think of applying lean concept from product discovery? Yeah, lean is about eliminating waste, and what we are trying to do with continuous product discovery and with this quick iterating and experimenting with prototype is to eliminate waste and eliminate rework, which this is a lean concept as far as I know. How can you repeat how you estimate the cost when prioritizing your ideas? What variables you take into consideration on this discovery space? Yeah, so the cost of implementing an idea is just a guesstimate. So it's a relative unit, like on a scale on 1 to 10, if you can estimate this group of ideas, how would you rate them? And this should be done by a developer. And of course, there is a high risk, high uncertainty. So this is only to compare different ideas, not to give you an exact number of days or hours to estimate. And then you typically want to compare value you can produce for the customers, so the opportunity score, to the estimated cost of the implementation of the idea. So you divide opportunity score by the estimated cost. But this is this is not related to any ROI, any dollars that you can. This is just a relative ratio that allows you to prioritize different ideas and different opportunities one over another. Okay, let me see how many questions. There are 4 questions, so I will answer just 4 questions, and I think I need to we need to finish for today. Can we think about using clean methodology approach for the product discovery? Yeah, I think this is the same if we are talking about lean startup. A lot yeah, it can be also interpreted as a question about lean startup. So if we are using lean startup, there is this concept of minimum viable product and iterating and learning as fast as possible. And of course, for a prototype, this is a specific type of experiment that you run to validate assumptions about your business model and about your product strategy, typically. And before you create an MVP, you can go through those phases like interviewing customers, collecting available data, structuring problems that you want to solve. So this would be pretty similar. A lot of what I have presented can be reused for the initial product discovery, but this is adjusted to continuous product discovery. I will describe it another time, how you can adjust it. How will I convince my stakeholders to perform continuous discovery habits? Yeah, again, are they satisfied with the current results and current outcomes, and do they want to try a different way of working, a way that how the best companies work, or maybe they want to continue the current results, the current outcomes, and they are satisfied with what they have. I found a link about what Marty Kagan said about 10-20 iteration per week, sharing for reference. Okay, let me see it very quickly. That was the last question, but I'm not sure I can read the article right now. Yeah. So it is set to set your expectations. Strong teams normally test many product ideas each week, on the order of 10 to 20 or more per week. So this is about testing. This is not about iterating with the product implementation or implementing with developing an idea. This is just about creating a sketch, and often you can use a single prototype to run like the number seems high, but in practice, when you use a tool like Maze, you can combine 10 or 15 experiments in a single survey, and every question that customer answers is about validating a different hypothesis. So in practice, you can easily do it. Okay, that would be it. Thank you. I hope you found the link. The link is in the published under Q&A and was also in the chat. It's great that so many people find time on Saturday to study, grow, and boost your careers. And you were not forced by your organization to take that course. You do it voluntarily. So thank you, and see you soon. I hope you will get great results during the exam. Thank you. Take care, and see you.